Welcome to Home RenoVision, YouTube channel that's dedicated to helping homeowners do DIY renovations and get professional results. Today we are talking about framing your basement. So we're going to be going through all the steps and techniques that you're going to need. This basement's half finished, but we're going to show you how to take it from to something fabulous. All right, so here we are in the basement. We're going to do a little bit of interior framing. I'm going to show you some basic techniques so that you can do it at home without running into trouble. So there's just a couple things you need to know, really. It's not that tricky, but if you don't do it right, you're in for a lot of aggravation. First thing you want to do is measure off your space, okay? You really want to get the height up into the bottom of your floor joist, and it's 93 1/8. I've double checked, it's the same all the way along. That doesn't happen very often, so when you're building like this, the best way to do it is take the shortest measurement, take about 1/8 of an inch off of that, and then cut all of the sticks the same height. Now the way you do your math is simple. You're going to have a top plate and a bottom plate. Make sure your bottom plate is pressure treated lumber if you're going directly on concrete, and especially in a basement, and then you aren't going to run into premature rot. When we attach all this together, the top plate and bottom plate equal 3 inches. So take that off of your measurement. In this case, it's 93 1/8. So we cut all of our studs at 90 inches, plus those makes 93. Gives me a little gap to help make it easy to put it in place. And then we just add a couple shims and nail it where it's supposed to go. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I love my laser. And here's why. Because that laser is on a stand. It gives me a line on the ground, up the wall, and across the ceiling. It shows me everywhere that this framing is going to start. So when I get my laser put in place, instead of leaving the laser on the entire time that I'm working, just pull out my black marker when I can find it. Hey Max, where's my marker? And I'm just going to put a reference mark. I'm going to draw that line. Now it's not very easy to see because Max has got some fabulous lighting in here to help everybody out. Wow, here it is. Okay, and we're going to mark the ceiling. Now what this is going to represent is the outside of the frame, not the inside. Very important to know what you're marking. And we'll just put a couple of reference points up here. All right, here we go. Now we got a few marks on the ceiling and the floor. All you have to do now is assemble it. And the way you want to do that is kind of like reading. Go left to right, okay? We're going up against an existing framework here. So because our building materials are 16-inch on center, we're going to start with a stud, all right, and realize that an 8-foot long board, to go 16-inch on center means at the end of that board, your last board needs to be right down the middle on that frame, not finishing it flush. And I'll show you why. So here we go, 32. Now if you have a tape measure like mine, you'll have little red squares that will match up with everything that you are doing. There we go, you see that? There's our 8-foot wall. Finishes on there. Now what we do is we just translate this information, okay? And then we put an X on the right side. And that represents where my stud's gonna go. Now we're ready to go. Now I am going to set this up so that my top starts here and I can lift this into place. I have enough clearance and I'll just pull the floor with me. If I do the other way, I've got some ductwork and stuff in the way. If I try lifting it up, I'm probably going to get caught on this, so we'll do this. We pick up the plate, all right, and just put it to the other end. Don't turn the board around or you're going to frame everything crooked. All we got to do is put them roughly where they go, and then start nailing it all together. Now, if you're going to be framing your basement, you might want to pick up a gun, something like this. This is a clipped head framing nailer. Those are 3 1/4 inch nails. This one's at 34 degrees. It's very common. Most of the guns are the same angle. The idea is it sets the nail in straight and keeps all the hardware away from where you're working. So this one's on a compressor, which is the most affordable option, all right? This gun is about 150, compressor's $100. It's a pretty affordable way to build something in a quick hurry. If you want to buy the gas gun, you can, but you will pay closer to $400 or $500 for it. Don't forget, with a gun like this, this is one time where I definitely agree with all the trolls, wear your safety glasses. Don't forget, you get 2 nails for every 2x4 stud. The rule of thumb, of course, is 1 nail for every 2 inches of dimensional lumber. Sooner or later, you're going to run into a piece of lumber that's twisted. Okay? Nail one end. Take your handy dandy shark tooth hammer, which is why I love this hammer. Lay it on the wood, and then you can twist into position a little bit past where you need it, and throw a couple of nails in, and that'll keep the stick straight, and you won't have any problems with it warping ever again. Now it's done. Let's get these off so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Now, just gonna pull this into position. Here's a little warning for you. If you have tile floor above the area where you're building, take an extra 1/4 inch off your frame size so you don't have to jam it in. You want to just place it in, have a nice gap, use 3-inch screws to screw it all together with shims. Because the flooring up here is actually, it's a laminate floor or carpet, I'm not worried about that, so I'm just going to go get my sledgehammer. It's nice because I don't get to use it very often. We're not going to go at it like crazy, just going to give it a love tap where it meets these floor joists. Find out where it's sticky. Remember, when your wood's on an angle, it's actually longer than the height. Because when we measure, we're using a thin little tape. But when you're 3.5 inches on an angle, it becomes a lot longer. So, we're lifting the floor, and then it'll settle back down again. Now, we just got to make sure that we're tight up against the wall here, because we might be perfectly level up and down, or plumb, as people try to remind me all the time. But if we check here, we're definitely out a little bit. So, yeah, I got a little bit of room both ends, so we're just going to give it a little bit of love here. Woohoo! Okay, so now that it's all nice and plumb, and just a couple of fasteners right into the bottom of the floor joist. You don't run any mechanical through the plate into the bottom of a joist. So you're never going to run a problem with your fastener being in the wrong spot. Okay, no need to block anything, no need to add all kinds of extra hardware. That's in place. Now the only thing we have left to do is throw a couple of fasteners into the ground. We will do that a little bit later today when I have all the rest of the walls done. And then I'll throw my hearing protection because that gun is loud. If you saw the shed video, you know what I'm talking about. So the next section we're going to cover is framing your door. Generally speaking, a standard size door is 80 inches high. Now keep in mind that the door jamb that door comes with, especially if it's a knockdown kit, is actually 81 inches from the top to the floor. They want to leave an inch gap underneath so that they can install it before all the flooring goes in. That's standard construction technology. Doors and all that trim go in before the flooring. I know. If you're renovating, you can do it the other way around. But if you're going to put all your flooring in first, take into consideration the height of the flooring if you're going to add the door jamb after. Because generally speaking, an 80-inch door, you want an 83-inch clearance before the header. Now, this one's not 83 inches. This is exactly 82, which is exactly the size of the door jamb. So it's going to be a bit of a problem for me. My solution, because in this case, the client's going with a vinyl floor directly onto the concrete, I'm going to just cut down the jambs to fit all through this basement. just going to take a 1/2 inch off because all of these doors are set up exactly at 82. There's no wiggle room for leveling and squaring. And that's why you want 83, okay? 83 inches gives you a nice gap there. You don't need the top of the jamb attached to anything. You just put the casing on and you're good to go. The other thing you gotta know is your wall square and plumb? And that's not bad. Now keep in mind, wood warps, twists, moves, all these wonderful things. So this is gonna be a double French door. We have lovely two 24-inch full glass with a privacy on it. So this is for the office space. Two 24-inch doors, plus a gap here, plus your jambs. Honestly, this should be a 50-inch hole. It's not, it's exactly 48. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a modification to this so that we can have the door the right size. And when I'm looking at this framing, I'm like, there's a lot going on here, framing around the gas line and the vacuum. We don't wanna touch that corner. Over here, it's just plain and simple. So what we're gonna end up doing is I'm gonna cut this area here on a bit of an angle just to make sure that I get a nice finish all the way through and my height's not gonna be affected. And then I'm gonna take two new studs and I'm gonna put them over here. Now, we are not supporting any weight with this door. It's just a hollow space. What I am gonna do is cut a little block here so that I can attach this and lift up the middle back into position because it's sagging now. And all we have to do is cut this out, put those two boards in, nail them together, reverse the crown so that if they're warped, you go like this and you screw them together nice and straight. That'll keep it straight forever so your door doesn't start sticking later. And instead of talking about it, let's get it done. Now, instead of going square, like I said, I'm gonna put a bit of an angle on it just to make sure that it's out of the way when I go to put my door jamb in. There we go. A duct screw. You know, it still works. I'll keep that for later. Well, and here's the thing. Like, you can't use regular screw on a deck, but you can use a deck screw on regular lumber. So if you had an outdoor deck project and you had a bunch of screws left over, that's fine to use them, but that is not a 3-inch construction screw. That is barely even touching the bottom plate. There's a good possibility that a lot of this might end up twisting up over time. All right, we still have more screws we can't get access to. I think we're just gonna cut them out. Ah, there they are. And there's most likely a couple of drywall screws on here. One of the advantages of cutting on an angle is I can roll this way off that drywall. Okay, don't have to be like that. And now it's time to set up our laser to make sure we get a nice plumb line. We want to come right off this corner. Bam, okay? There, that's perfect. Now I've pre-cut my lumber. I'm checking the board. It has a bit of a curve this way. I'm using my hand, a little exaggerating. I'm gonna put an X on the outside, okay? And then I'm gonna check this piece for the same thing. There doesn't appear to be any twist at all on this one. Maybe a little bit this way. Okay, now they're both relatively straight, but the little bit of curve that's in them is letting us know what their intention is down the road. If you put both of them together like this, that have this curve, okay, it'll go together real easy. You put it in the wall and it'll just want to keep on curving. And so eventually that frame will push into the door, cause you problems. If you take the curves like this and then screw them together, then they're going to be fighting against each other the whole time and the screws will hold it in place and your doors will never get sticky. Okay, so the height that I need is 89 3/4 inch or 228 centimeters. I think I read that right for all of our European friends. I'm learning. Real quick, I'll show you a little trick. I love doing this because in this situation, we're in our basement, we're renovating. We don't have a lot of electrical down here. It still has to be all wired up later this afternoon. So all I have is 2 plugs, one for the compressor, one for the lights, and a skill saw. So it's easier to move this around the basement as I'm working than to have my chop saw set up and trying to run continuous power to it. Basically what we're doing here is we're setting our guide on my mark, bringing the speed square up to the plate, and I'm going to hold the square in place, and then this provides me something to run the saw against so I get a straight cut. Now, make sure you don't cut your legs off like an idiot. But if you're holding this right and you're pushing straight and you have a sharp blade, it'll never bind, it'll never kick back. If you're finding that you're fighting with your saw, it's time for a new blade. Invest in it, because that is when an accident's going to happen. And if you're not comfortable with this, set the chop saw up outside and run up and down the stairs 300 times. That's pretty damn exact, isn't it? Woohoo! So I'm a bit old school, and I still appreciate the idea of using screws to frame my doors. For the amount of times that the designs will change, the plans will change, they'll come down and be like, oh, you know what? We really like the door, but can we make it this big instead? It's a lot easier if all the rework you've done here is screwed in, because you can always unscrew it. And then you're not cutting lumber and throwing it in the garbage. So, if you're not exactly sure, I'm 100% sure you're going to be happy with the finished project, use a screw. Now the way we do this is to make sure you're flush. Attaching it to the plate first, and then come through the face into the existing framing to tie everything together so you don't get cracks in drywall down the road. Okay, then, because our laser is in perfect position, we are going to make sure that this front edge is exactly where we want it. I'm going to move that right where we want it. Now before I bury the head, make sure you're good here. You got a bit of an overhang. Remember, when you're on an angle, it'll drive the wood forward. So I'm just going to drive forward, but I'm going to check here, make sure that that gap closes. Done. And then I'm going to come from the other side here. And it pulled it square. I'm going to throw in another screw now just to make sure that it doesn't want to twist over time. Beautiful. Put this one in. Wow, that is really perfect. Now that's in position, the secret here is to make sure that it's not going to twist. You have to double tap it together. Every 2 feet, side by side. Preferably with a fresh battery. This one's about to die. I'm using 6. So 2, 4, 6 feet, and I've screwed the top already. By tightening all this together, it's not going to warp over time. Done. Now it's just a matter of cutting this drywall back. Okay. The only thing left is to cut out the bottom plate. Now, you can see here, this plate has been fastened to the concrete with these nails here. Explosive hammer. So I'm just going to trim this back out of our way. Perfect. So now that the door is done, we've got another little project here. We're closing up under the stairs. And one of the things you're going to find is that around staircases, nobody is really giving two concerns over plumb, square, all that kind of business, right? But what we want is when we have our finished space, what I'm finishing on the inside, I want it to look good. So this is going to look stupid on this side of the room, but that's okay. I'm going to just pretend I'm going to try to create a flat wall here. Right. Okay. So that makes that somewhat straight, somewhat flush, which should be somewhat square. The outside corner is a disaster. Basically, I just created this filler. This is a little bit smaller than the hole because I'm screwing it all together. So I'm not concerned about it fitting exactly perfect. It can be frustrating when you're attaching things to things that aren't square and plumb. So when in doubt, leave yourself a little bit of room, and then you can just go ahead and screw it all together. One of the benefits is these outside boards can bow to fill the space. It's not going to hurt. The goal is to make sure that when I put my finished wallboard on, it's attached to something that's not moving. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. So if it has a warp, it's fine as long as it's screwed together. That's why I use the screws, because then it's not going to be pulling off the wall and breaking the joint later. Okay, so it's time to put your bottom plates together. So you can see that when you angle your screw going from this corner, it'll go down and hit right about the middle of that plate on the other side. That is the perfect location. Okay. If you drive your screws like that, you won't have any trouble. There we go. Now this little project here is going to need a little bit of back framing. We're going to have to add a piece of lumber here, build something for this corner. We're going to be closing off the ceiling at this height because this one's coming across, so we'll put a block here and a block over here. It's called back framing. Little sticks here and there to carry the other side of a drywall. And when you're doing that, it's all about making sure that the drywall joints don't come loose. So back framing is necessary to be screwed together. It gives you a surface to attach your drywall, and then framing is done. So as long as every corner has somewhere to attach drywall on both sides, you're good to go. Okay, so we put this wall up a couple days ago and had the electricians come in, and we needed this wall because there was going to be a plug here. The rest of this piece of wall section we built separately, and I installed it yesterday while the electricians were working, and it's just here. And basically what we did is we just measured the gap on the floor, the gap on the ceiling, made my top and bottom plates, built it, stuck it in, added this brace here. Now this is important. This brace is added so that the middle of the wall is also tied to this wall, and that'll keep these things from moving independently and causing cracks in the drywall. The only thing that's left here to do is a little back framing, and that's part of the drywall process. Just before we go do drywall, we walk around with a bunch of 1x4s and we tie things in like that just to have a screw surface for the drywall. But we can do that while we're waiting for our drywall delivery tomorrow. Today we are going to attach our plate. That's the last thing to do. So the ceiling is already screwed in place. This wall was wedged in place pretty good, but we have our marks on the ground to make sure that everything is still level and square from the laser line. And now we're just going to attach to the concrete for good measure. And it's important you don't get lazy with this. Even though this wall is wedged in, you might find that over time things can change with the way the foundation settles and things will move around. We have concrete posts, and those are sitting on little 2x2 foot boxes of concrete underneath the concrete floor. So there can be variations in where things settle over time. And this might end up not being as compact as you think. So it's important to get that concrete nailed together with the wood before we move any further. Now you can use your tap cons, get your drill out and drill a hole and attach it. But the reality is, none of this is structural, okay? When you're framing in a basement, remember that all the structural work is already finished. The only thing we're doing is building interior walls. And the goal of an interior wall is really two things. One is to provide us an opportunity so that we have something to drill through to move our electrical, plumbing, mechanical, and give us something to attach our drywall to. So the only thing it has to do is stay in place, all right? That's easily achieved with some adhesives, some screws, and a couple of impact nails. And what this does is this drives down, it's a 3-inch nail, goes through the 1.5-inch plate into the concrete, and even if it isn't completely buried, it's stuck in the concrete so the wall can't move it back and forth. Really the goal here is just to affix it in place, and then you walk away. So you don't have to go overboard here. Just got to drive a few in place to keep things nice and still for the long haul. Now, here's my new ram set. This is awesome. It's trigger action. One shot, so you have to have a pellet. And these little ram sets, they come in different strengths, and they're color coded. So yellow is number 4. This is ideal for concrete. If you wanted to go with the number 5 for steel, you can. And we just put that shot in there, right? But we always put the nail in first. You don't want to be working with this and accidentally hit the trigger. So put your nail in, put it where you want to put it into the concrete, then add the shot, okay? And then we just set it down and then you lock it in position just a little bit more. Pull the trigger. Bam. 22 caliber action, ladies and gentlemen. Gets the job done every time. Fire in the hole! This is an interior separation wall, and it is on concrete and under steel. Now, we did a video in another basement project, man, must be a year and a half ago now. We showed you how to attach a plate like this into steel. And we used a pre-drill and then a steel screw system, and that works great, but it's not always necessary. So there is another way to do this, and we're going to show you, because this new Remington impact driver that I have would work awesome in this situation. So we're going to show you a couple of different options for attaching this to the steel, and of course we're going to nail in the plate. Now, the most important thing here is the steel isn't going to move. So we're going to use that as our straight line, so we might as well attach the ceiling first, but we want to make sure that the bottom plate is in position before we get too crazy here. So if we're going to assume that the top is where it needs to be, I'm going to look at this bubble here, and I'm going to play around. Nope. Yep, the bottom definitely has to go in. And so I am going to just make this adjustment here until I'm happy. Nice. And by putting the level on the steel and then pushing the wood into it and making that nice full contact, you know, these 6-foot levels, they really come in handy. Brilliant. Everybody should get something this long. I think it's just a little over $100, but if you're framing anything that you're concerned being plumb, this is the way to go. Now, the order that we do this, of course, now that we have this level, and we know exactly where our level position is on the top, just because it's flush with the steel, I'm going to throw in a quick little mark. Love these markers for this. Anything happens while you're working, you don't have to go back to leveling process again. Just bring yourself back to the black line. We're going to get a couple of fasteners in here, and then I'm going to show you how to attach the top. And just a quick word of warning, if you're a DIYer and you have travel plans, make sure if you're using that gun, you have a really good shower before you go try and get through an airport. Because if you get randomly selected for a gunshot residue test, you will fail. And they will have some interesting conversations with you in the back room all by yourself. I know that might sound crazy, but don't wear the same shoes you travel with either. Because those sniffer dogs, they'll pick that up off your shoes. Man, they will not be happy to find you. Top plates. This is awesome. I love top plates. Remember, nothing here is structural. The steel is. That's the only thing that's not going anywhere. So what we're going to do is attach to the steel. And I have a great system for doing that. And it's going to offend some people. Because it's so good, you're going to go, why didn't I think of that? Right? Construction adhesive. This is awesome. This stuff sticks to everything in every weather and every kind of temperature. And all we're going to do here, folks, is load that up with adhesive and shove our shim right in the middle of it. Oh, yeah. Boom, boom, boom. See how that gets coated up? Now, if it's a really big hole, just put a little bit more on your shim. And we're just laminating and gluing these things together. And it's going to get a little bit messy. That's fine. Oh, yeah. Okay, now we just want to make sure it's nice and flush. Leave it to dry until tomorrow. Okay, come back, take your knife, trim it all off, boom, you're done. Or, if you really enjoy using your hammer, we can still go into the steel. What this will do is this will anchor everything in place. All right, now this particular gun works great upside down because it's a trigger action. There is one secret though, so you don't have a backfire. You want to put that in there. Close the compartment, okay? Put it up into place and keep the pressure on it. All right, that way your pellet won't fall out. Whew, do not expect your nail to go bury in there. It is in the steel, probably like 1/8 of an inch, but it's enough to keep this thing from moving around now. That way you aren't gonna have an accident while you're working for the rest of the day. Come back in the morning and find this all glued together 1/2 inch out of place. Perfect, every time. All right, so one of the most difficult things you're gonna run into as a homeowner if you're doing your own basement is how to tie in your interior walls to the exterior walls especially when you are underneath the beam. Because in most cases, the way they frame the house is they frame up to the beam and that's it. And you'll see down here, there's no plate. This is one wall section. There's where the beam is. That's another wall section. It's very typical. You don't see too often where guys will actually frame this around the beam on the floor and then lift it up into place. Usually because the furnace is already going to be there. All right, it's just a matter of order of things. So when you go to frame this, you need to have some blocking here, so this wall actually has something to attach to when you get to the other side. Now in our situation, I've got a drain line here, and I'm going to have to redirect it back into the mechanical room, drill a new hole in the foundation to get the drip from all the condensation issue underneath the floor. So that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go cut the vapor barrier right on the wood. Okay, important. This is an important step. Don't cut it beside the wood. It's hard to get a good tape joint afterwards if you can't press on that tape. The tape works really good, but only if you can get compression. All right, so then we take that, we're gonna cut across. Okay, now we're gonna pull our plastic out of the way. Oh, there's a nice little overlap there, eh? We don't need that because one layer is enough. We're gonna take our block that we cut for this. We're going to put it in nice and flush, and then we're going to screw it in. Okay? All right, so resist the temptation to come on the sides here. This is a small piece of wood. Really just want to push your way back in here. Get in behind the plastic if you can. All right. Now you only need one screw on each side, okay? You don't need a bunch here. Resist the temptation to use way too much hardware in a small space. Seems to be human nature for some reason. Okay, there we go. That one's blocked in. Now we're going to do another one down here because we want to be able to hold the wall at 2 locations at least. I like 3, top, middle, and bottom. Coming across, same thing. Even if this wall meets right on this stud, you're going to want to cut the plastic open and add another piece of stud this way, okay? Because when this closes up, you need a drywall surface. So no matter which way you're attaching your interior walls to your exterior, you either got a block like this or you got to create an L in the frame to receive a wall so that you can hang your drywall. So having this understanding is paramount to a good installation. Remember, wherever you puncture a vapor barrier, you need to seal it back up again, or it's no longer a barrier. Here we go. Done. Now all we got to do is put a piece of wood from the flush to the top of this plate, all right, and level it off at the bottom and screw it together. Piece of cake. Now, let's recap. Basic home interior renovation. If you're building a basement and you have no walls at all on the exterior either, you might be one of the lucky few that have an insulation blanket, which is allowed in some districts for a certain period of time by the code. So new home builders got lazy and just put a blanket wrap insulation up against the outside wall, no framing. If you're going to frame a wall, remember the basics. If you're going on concrete, you need at bare minimum a pressure treated plate for the bottom. If you're not going to use pressure treated lumber, then you got to have a sill gasket of some sort, whether it's the fiberglass pink thing that comes in the roll, or a black plastic, or a vapor barrier. All 3 of those are acceptable. So ask your building store which one was good for you. Your framing should be 16-inch on center or 24-inch on center. No other dimension is going to work well for you because the insulation only comes in 16s and 24s. So always build according to the next material you're going to use. If you're going 2 feet on center or 16s, your drywall will install properly, your insulation will install properly, and everything will go well for you. So just keep it simple, and remember, on really long walls, just think drywall. The longest sheet you can get is 12 feet, but they come in 2-foot increments mostly. So make sure that you're going to have somewhere where the drywall can join up. And if you want to cheat and you want to put a stud up against another stud where the joint will be, that's fine, but screw those together. Don't rely on nails or that joint will crack, okay? Whew, I think that covers all the basics. If you have any extra questions, put them in the comment section below, and then everybody can get into the conversation and we can all learn together about how to solve all of our problems when it comes to framing your basement. So if you're renovating your basement, guaranteed you're going to need to know how to build a bulkhead, because every home that I've ever been in that has a basement has a heating and cooling system. So You need to know how to build a box around this because it's not as easy as you think, and yet it's so simple. I see it all the time, people building elaborate structures to get drywall to cover around here. So what I want you to understand is we're installing drywall. The only thing that you need to do is be able to hold it in place so that it's not moving, so you don't get cracks, and that you can paint it. That's it. The only function is to close things up. Now, since you can hang a whole sheet of drywall on one screw, I need you to just take a step back from the idea of making something elaborate with wood and try to simplify the process. A sheet of drywall that's 4 feet wide, which is usually enough to cover most bulkheads. Yep, 4 feet wide. Now, in this particular case, we're going out wider. We're going to go to 5 feet because we want to encase the gas line here as well. But 4 feet wide is typical. You need something to hold weight on each end and something up the middle. You can install ceilings with 2 feet on center structure. That's not a problem. And if your gap is getting really big, then just switch your drywall from regular 1/2 inch to 5/8 because that is a fiberglass reinforced drywall and it is so rigid you can span 36 inches with that without anything attached. It won't be a problem. Now, in order to get this up here, I've developed the system. First of all, we have a steel beam. So let's talk about that. What we do is we just use a construction adhesive and we put lumber in there, bottom and on the front, bottom and on the front, and we glue it all in place. There we go. Okay, so we have 2 pieces of wood, we glue it in place, and then we can take another piece of wood and screw it to this the next day. So before I go home tonight, I'm going to actually glue all my wood in, and you can do this another way too. A lot of these times, these steel beams, the interior dimension of that steel beam is exactly the same as dimensional lumber. So you can actually stick a 2x8 in here as well, but if you want to be a little bit cheap and just put a few blocks here, and then 8 or 10 feet down the road, put a couple more blocks, glue it, let it sit overnight, and then you can screw whatever lumber you want, nice and level, get your laser out and make sure it's all perfect. That's a great way to deal with steel beams. The next thing is in between the beams. So in between the beam, I like to build it exactly the same as beside the beam. Now this is my system that I've developed, and it works like a charm. I go to Home Depot, I buy some 7/16 chipboard. It's just exterior aspenite. It's nice and cheap. And I screw 2x2s to it, all right? And the way I do it is I offset it 3 inches. That way I can attach them like a Tetris puzzle, build really long boxes and screw it all together. Now what you want to do is you want to go something normal. Like in this situation, our dimension is actually 9.5 inches is the drop in the ceiling, which is perfect. Because if you go to Home Depot and you get them to do it on the saw there, you can have them rip 9.5 inches off the bottom of the sheet over and over and over again, and it comes out to perfect pieces at 9.5 inches. I know it sounds crazy, but 9.5 times whatever times is a perfect 48-inch sheet, and you get to use all of the wood, and it is a perfect bulkhead. So even if you don't need the whole 9.5, sometimes it's just easier to just cut it at 9.5. It's a number that sticks in your head, and it'll work in every bulkhead situation. Once you've screwed this together, your 2x2, which is usually a little wonky, will be nice and straight, okay? You just have to make sure that the warp that's in that board is working against the plywood, because this piece of aspenite will straighten out any board if you put enough screws in it. Once you've got a bunch of these made, then it's just time to install them. Now the best part of this system is when you're putting in something in between the ductwork, it's not rocket science, it's not measuring, it's just getting it in the middle. Try not to install it over top of these little brackets and screws. It creates an uneven surface. So you want to get flush to the wood, keep the wires to one side or another if you're putting in pot lights. And all you do is lift it into place roughly, because we're just carrying a little extra load. So here's my system. Because this is 7/16, it's not that heavy, and you can do this alone. Okay, make sure there's room for everything. Get it off the screws for the ducting. There you go. One screw will hold all the weight. You got time to come down here and inspect and just make sure it's what you want. Bam. Okay, there we go. Now, I know this is crazy, but 2 screws is enough. Those 2 screws are going to carry 160 pounds. You'd have to put 6 layers of drywall here before you're going to have that kind of weight. So don't worry about it. 2's lots. All you do now is take another 2x2, screw it to the bottom, And the reason I left it like that to begin with is so that I can get up there and see what I'm doing. It's not a lot of space. So get another 2x2 and just use some coarse thread drywall screws, screw it to the bottom. Now you got a hanging surface for your drywall. One of the reasons this works so well is because the houses today have got engineered floor joists. So you don't have to worry about the crown of a floor joist up and down and uneven. It's usually really, really flat. So you can trust that the surface I'm screwing to is already level and flat. So if we're working off the floor joist or the steel, it's all the same thing because the steel determines how flat the floor is going to be and the engineered floor joists keep it that way. So everything we attach, if we pre-make it, cut it and drill it, screw it together, we can just install it that quick and simple. It's like working with Lego. So we're going to install our wood into our floor joist package. Like I said, one adhesive on 2 sides of each block. Okay. Now, carefully put this in so we can get away unscathed. Just press it in. And then just press this in. There, that's ready to roll. So one of the most important parts of a basement renovation from a professional standpoint and getting a professional result is in your bulkhead and how straight your line is. All right? At the end of the day, people will come downstairs and they will judge with their eyes how perfectly square and level and straight everything is. And they'll decide if you've done a good job or not before they even walk through the room. So it's very important, especially if you're planning on selling your house, of having a nice straight bulkhead line that seems not to be closing or opening up and is parallel with the wall that's longest in the room to measure it against. The way we do that, of course, is we use our laser. Now, boom. Here's the trick. Where, oh where does my laser go? Okay, we have to pick a spot and then we have to make sure this is parallel to the longest wall. The mechanical that's in the ceiling looks generally straight, but you don't want to bet on anything, okay? That's not how you're going to judge. If this gas line is installed a 1/2 inch one end out to the other, it will show up when you walk in the room. I don't know how, but even people that don't have any ability to understand construction can walk in a room and see something that's out of square. It's just a human thing, right? We all have that ability. So when you have it all exposed, it'll look straight, but it won't be when you paint. So get your laser out, throw a line, and the only way to do this really is to measure off the wall. So what I've got is I've got a line here, and I want to judge, I want to go off of lumber, which is flush with the steel, and I want to put a mark here. And I'm reading my tape, it says 64 inches. All right, now, here, I want to put that mark on that red line and put my number 64. And I'm going to check at the extreme other end here and see how I'm doing. Now, I'm going to get you. Now, I am 63.5. Okay? So before you go touch anything else, add the 1/2 inch to the laser line, make a mark. Now, all you have to do, with the tape measure put away and the marker put away, is go back to your laser and line up the 2 dots. I'm just moving the base over on my tripod here until I have both of those lines connected together. Okay, there we go. Now I have a line on my ceiling that's perfectly parallel to the other steel beam, which is what that wall is built under. And I know when I'm finished, I'm going to have a perfect bulkhead line. Now, the next step here is take your black marker, cover those red lines, because that laser is going to get bumping around and it's going to be in the way, and then you're going to have to pull it back out again. If you put your mark on your ceiling, you won't have an issue. Now, I have had a lot of people on our last bulkhead video that we did a couple years back commenting about how why don't you use steel in the basement, Jeff? It's so much straighter. And here's why. It's a lot more work. I can make all my bulkheads in about an hour, pre-assemble them all, and then I can just stick them in, use my laser level, screw it all together. And because I've got a line to follow, my ceiling line will be perfectly straight. Once that ceiling line is straight, the only other thing I have to worry about is whether or not my bulkhead is square to the ceiling. And that's what we do. We take care of that when we're putting in our drywall. We don't do that now. So all I have to do is mount this and I'm ready for drywall. That's simple. That's why I don't use steel. Now, depending on how you're strapping your ceiling, you can either have this exposed to the finished ceiling if you're using 2x4s. Sometimes it's necessary, you've got plumbing lines and things like that you got to get beneath. But we're just going with regular strapping. So I'm going to put this on the inside, which is why I don't have anything attached to the bottom yet. Now, I have a straight line, and I'm going to just hold this up against my black mark here and put a screw there. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, you could have been a little bit closer. Truth is, yeah, you can always fight around with 1 inch here and there, but I like to have a bit of distance. Don't forget, building code, gas line, you need some distance behind your framing. Depending on the region you're in, it could be up to 3 inches or more. So here we go. Just set up the line, throw in a couple of screws. Now this is 2 8-foot sections of bulkhead that I'm installing here, and it's going to take me less than 4 minutes. Try doing that with steel. Now you see on my pieces here, I've got the ends offset 3 inches. And because we're only using this to hang drywall, it doesn't have to be perfect. But what this is the completion of 16 feet of drywall bulkhead. There we go. I love this because I can do it alone, and I can do it in less than half the time of 2 or 3 guys working with steel. I'll screw those 2 panels together, just like that, and done. Now I'm going to come to the other end, and you will see that I'm off my mark because the wood is not straight. But how easy is it to just do this? Oops. Perfect. Perfect every time. You can see this stuff is not straight. That's fine. I'm only holding up drywall. I still have to put an outside corner on and do all my mud work. So what I do is I take the bow in this board and I actually put the bow so it's like my bow is like this towards the wood, and I'm installing it flush on the bottom. Now I'll use 5 screws for every 8 feet. Okay? And that'll carry a couple 100 pounds on this side. I've got a couple 100 pounds on the middle and a couple 100 pounds on the other side. There we go. So now I've got, I don't know what, with 3 supports on the ceiling, I've got enough here to carry 600 pounds on these drywall screws alone. That's just ridiculous. You'll never see 600 pounds of weight on that ceiling. The way this is finished off, I love. I'm going to bring in my drywall lift. I'm going to put a big sheet of drywall on here, and I'm going to go from the outside to this side, 4 feet wide. I'm going to screw there, I'm going to screw here, and then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to pull out my big framing square, put it on the ceiling, and make it absolutely perfectly dead square from the ceiling. And then I'll screw it in. Because I'm not holding the drywall while I'm working. I just lift it up with the lift, and I can pull this around and manipulate it where I want it, and then drive a screw in. And I can do that every 16 inches as I'm going along, make it perfect. Now you can see on the camera, it's pretty good. The top is perfect. The bottom's got a little bit of a wave to it because it hasn't been supported yet. That's why I mentioned it's important. Make sure that you use the square, get it done perfect. But what you have overall is a pretty straight line. Because this is so flexible, any of the other waves will be taken out while I put the ceiling in. Now, if that's not good enough, the way that we finish this is we're going to be putting an outside corner bead on, and it is going to be paper wrapped over the metal and attached to the mud. So at the end of it, I'm actually going to put way too much mud here, and I'm going to set this in where I want it. And I'm going to be able to work on creating a brand new line even again after the drywall. This is going to work out to my favor because when I'm installing this, I don't have to go perfectly square. I can actually open it in just a little bit so that when I'm done building out my corner, it finishes perfectly square. That's key. So I can put it on a 2-degree angle, screw it in, add my corner bead, my mud buildup, and then it would be perfectly square. Such a simple system. You can wrap anything with this. You can make it as long as you need to. You can use it 2-3 feet down. You don't have to have extra support. Let the plywood do the work. Keep it light, keep it straight, keep it quick, and you can DIY any bulkhead in your basement. Well, there we go. We've taught you how to frame an entire basement so that you can finish your whole project by yourself. Just remember that one of the most important things when it comes to framing is when you're done. Clean up. Put your tools away. Make sure you unplug any power tools. Sweep up. Keep a clean site. Remember, your kids and your pets aren't going to be as careful walking around as you will be, all right? Now listen, if you love this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Click the link below. Ask questions. I love the questions. There's a lot of different kinds of basements, a lot of different building techniques, and a lot of different designs that they're going to have to be covered. So if you got questions, put them in the comment section. I'll answer your questions every single day, and we will see you again in the next video.